Welcome, Wargamers. Doug here from 2 Plus Stuff, and I have kind of a fun video for us here today. You see, I have a Discord along with my guys over at Rerolling Ones, and we have some really fun discussions there, okay? And one of the ones that came up, an idea that was generated, is in regards to the Cities of Sigmar battletome. Now, this is a battletome that kind of feels like Games Workshop duct taping a whole bunch of units together and then being like, it's an army, and it's a very cool army. It's very effective in the game, but there are a lot of rooms for improvement when it comes to adding a lot more flavor and kind of zest, if you will, to the way the faction works. If we look at things like, Legions of Nagash, which was the older battle tome for death factions, it was kind of the same thing. How do we get a battle tome out there for all of these models, kits, and stuff like that Games Workshop makes, and turn it into a cohesive army, which they did. And then they came out with another battle tome called Soulblight Gravelords, which took that same concept and then added a lot more flavor and kind of direction to it. Well, so if they do the same thing for Cities of Sigmar, what could that look like? And so that's what we're going to be discussing here today. Cool concepts that could exist for Cities of Sigmar, and if you have any of your own, leave them in the comments down below. I'd love to read them. So we'll kick it off by looking at the original post that was sort of the inspiration for this video. From user Rhinoceruption, first of all, I love that name. For Cities of Sigmar, I put a topic of the day out there that was just if you wanted to rewrite a faction, okay? So they're replying to me. Cities of Sigmar, merge some units to be like conscripts for Sigmar, so Dread Spears, Free Guild Guard, Longbeards, basically anything that does the same kind of job as it was clarified later, right? Just base troops, merge them all together. Then change the different heroes to buff different stats, but work more cohesively, right? Making them like a true cohesive fighting force. I'm going to skip down here. You can even add a rule that when you add a unit like this to your army, you declare this is a mixed unit, elven, human, or dwarven. So if it's mixed, the bonus would be something like +3 to their bravery. If it's elven, they're lithe, they're more fast. If they're human, if the unit hasn't moved, it gets +1 to hit this turn. I like that. And if they're dwarven, they -1 movement, but add 1 to save rolls. Now, let me start off by saying why I love this idea. For me, the measure of if a battle tome is quote-unquote good is less about how the units physically interact with one another, but more so when you look at a standard battle tome. Actually, I'm going to get one right now. Let's do this example. Here we go. This is perfect. This is the Orc War Clans battle tome. You see this little part over here that makes up like maybe a quarter, maybe a fifth of the book? That's the rules, right? The rest of it is lore and artwork and stuff to get you really excited about the faction. To me, what makes a battle tome good is does that little 1/5 of the book that's rules reflect everything else in the book. The story is told first, and then they invite you to have a way of playing it on the table. So, a battle tome is good if what you play on the table reflects the stories that you just finished reading. That is my opinion. And in this regard, I think the idea that Rhinoceruption, yep, that's a hard one to say, put out there really does kind of epitomize what Cities of Sigmar is supposed to be. You see, right now, Cities is sort of an interesting book because you have this huge well of units that you can draw from, but it gives you the choice only to put them into a few select cities. Now, admittedly, the number of cities you can put them in is growing all the time. It feels like every time there's like a campaign supplement, there's a new city allegiance ability that you can put them in, and that's awesome. But it does not really convey the fact of the lore in the start of that entire book is telling you about how these different types of species or civilizations have to work together to make a cohesive fighting force. The whole idea behind cities from a lore perspective is that in the Age of Myth, they were all very different kingdoms. There was dwarf holds, there were elves living all over the place, there was humans all over the place. Chaos comes in and just wrecks everybody's day. They all flee to Azir, and now they have to work together collectively to retake what was lost. So you will have things like humans working with dwarves to take back a hold that used to belong to this dwarf's ancient relative back in the days of myth, and in response, once they get it, well, now that dwarf has the forges to make weapons to go help the human guys get their territorial, their ancestral lands back. That kind of thing, where they work together both as fantasy races, meaning dwarves, elves, humans, that kind of stuff, and they have to work collectively as an army. None of that really shows up in the current rules, which is kind of a bummer. Instead, they go the route of, here are all the units from across all the different races. For whatever reason, even though they're all trying to fight together, they've decided to stay very, very separate, and they're all from the same place, one of, 6 cities, which to me never really made a lot of sense, because they're very specific cities at that. And so, how can we remedy this, right? Again, I'm not talking about game balance or anything like that. I'm talking about how do we make the rules portion, that 1/5 of the book, more accurately reflect all the stories and cool stuff that comes before it. Here's an idea. We have one from our Discord. Well, this is supposed to represent a mixing of all these different factions and things like that for a cohesive reason. And, from a play perspective, we do have a lot of redundancy when it comes to, is it Free Guild Spearmen or is it Dread Spears? Is there a massive difference? No, you tend to just go with the cheapest thing. Why? Because Spearmen die in droves, right? That's not what's going to win you the day. So scratch it. Put all those units into some grand archetypes. Free Guild regiments can have any kind of spearmen that they want, right? Mix all the factions and the species together, and then you just choose, hey, what kind of unit is this? What do they focus on? What have they been drilling? Have they been drilling speed and agility? Reflect it that way. Again, the original post went with more of like the word racial has a strong tone here, but racial in the fantasy sense of different species, that kind of thing. If it leans heavily one way or the other, then it will have rules to reflect it. I like that quite a bit. I don't have to go that far as like modeling goes, having actual, as long as there's 21 elves in your unit of 30 models, they get the elven bonus. I don't care about that. Just tell me where they came from and who taught them, right? A sergeant who is an elf is going to teach battle differently than a human or than a dwarf. They're going to be different. So it doesn't need to be modeled necessarily. It's more of an invitation, hey, kit bash to your heart's content, make these guys a cohesive army, and then tell me who trained them, where they're from, what their ranks are made of, mostly, that kind of thing. So right off the bat, I love that. Of course, your artillery would likely, if you went that route for every unit, almost always be dwarven in some way, because dwarves understand guns and gunpowder. And that makes sense to me, right? If all of these factions were suddenly thrown in a pot together, the best things at what they do would always rise to the top. Dwarves are running the guns. Elves are on, skirmish duty or scouting, that kind of stuff. And humans will make up the bulk of the army just because they can stand and take it. And hey, if they all get mixed together in a unit, I don't know, I think bravery bonuses is a pretty awesome, just general blanket statement. We're all working together. Everyone's on the same team. Let's be brave. So I'm already sold on that idea, but how can we go a step further? And so this is where I'm going to start getting into my own ideas. So let's take those unit ideas from a Rhinoceros Eruption, and I have a pad of paper here. Let's check it out. All right, here we are at the downward cam. Please forgive me holding this awkwardly. My camera's having trouble focusing all of a sudden with the solid white paper. But in addition to having units kind of being combined, which would do a dual thing of culling some of the redundant options in the battletome as well as adding flavor to the units that are then left, what else can we do? Well, in Age of Sigmar right now, we are in what's called the Era of the Beast, meaning the forces of order are now going out and planting new cities. They're trying to create all kinds of, villages, I don't know what else, outposts, that kind of stuff, and the forces of destruction are trying to destroy them. So let's move away from specific cities like Hammerhall Akshi, Hammerhall Gyra, all those Tempest Eye. Let's move away from that. Instead, let's give you, the player, the power to design a city based on this current updated lore, right? We're trying to create cities. So instead, my idea has been, and again, forgive the focus, there we go. Let's do this. Let's do settlement, size, and focus. Okay, so we got our things there. So what I'm talking about is rather than looking at specific cities, let's examine where they are on that process of being developed, okay? So we can do anything from outpost, maybe they just planted it. We could do war camp. And we could do city, and then grand city. Okay, grand city would be things like basically everything that exists in Cities of Sigmar right now. Hammerhall actually is a colossal fortification with all kinds of lava traps going around. It's a grand construct, okay? So we're going to put massive and teeny. Okay, that's going to be our scale. I'm not going to go into too much detail about them, but we can have them focus on different things. So a grand city, because they're so well defended and that kind of stuff, they have all these traps and stuff built up, their focus is going to be on defense. So they're going to give you bonuses to standing and shooting and capturing objectives. Why? Because those objectives are on their doorstep. They own them. They can defend them with their lives. Conversely, something like an outpost might simply just be like an inn that exists in the middle of nowhere. So maybe they focus on skirmishing. So they're going to really like speed because they're going to have a lot of horses. They're going to be having a lot of ways to get to and fro and navigate the woods. Maybe even like a teleport ability from elves kind of sulking through the forests. War camps might focus on martial combat. Why? Because they've established this camp to prepare for battle. So we'll do combat. In cities, it can be whatever you want. I don't know why I put city there. It's just sort of like a general term. Maybe they can kind of be a mix of all the above somehow. But you get what I'm saying, where divorcing the idea of a city of Sigmar from the major cities that exist opens up a lot of design space. Because now, you as a player, well, my city that I created with my custom city creator mind is an outpost. They're just getting started with settling the land, and so they're going to have restrictions for army building and that kind of stuff, but they're really fast, they're really light on their feet, they're always vigilant because they're always expecting an attack. They don't have big walls to defend them. All the way conversely to grand cities like we have now, where they are superstructures that have well-entrenched defensive systems, and so they're going to play to objectives in that same fashion. Anyway, please forgive the camera being all finicky there with focusing, but that's my idea. I was just, let's move away from established cities, and even if you wanted to use the same rules, that's fine, but at least have us, let us as players look at the lore for how all of this mixing of different species and factions and sub-factions are coming together to form a cohesive army. At the same time, going out and building new cities that are all at different levels of development, and combine those ideas so that we can actually create a true lore-focused city of Sigmar. And while it can get a bit complex, it will require quite an overhaul to do that. The thing that I came up with is more just about allegiance abilities. It's not really terribly complicated. The thing that Renocerruption put out there is a bit more complicated because it's going to require a culling of war scrolls, not necessarily model kits, but war scrolls. And kind of recombining them in different ways, which I just generally approve of. But yeah, when we look at the change that happened between Legions of Nagash to Soulblight Gravelords, what it shows me is that there's a lot of potential. There's tons of potential because they do have such massive model lines. So, I mean, it could be mute. They could delete 6 kits and then come out with one called the Free Guild kit, which has various, there's a dwarf with Free Guild guy, there's an elf Free Guild guy, and that's the new hotness. You can play that, or of course, if you already have cities, you can just combine the units that you already own and to make those exact same things. There's a lot of design space, a lot of possibility. It's all out there. But I would like to hear yours. So, if you have an idea on how we can make Cities of Sigmar more accurately reflect all of the lore in the front end of it, I would love to hear it. Leave in the comments down below and, I don't know, shoot me a message on the Discord for that same reason. So I'm excited to read all this stuff. Renocerruption, I love the comment that you had. Join our Discord, super friendly. Try to keep it pretty casual. So anyway, I'll catch you guys there. Thank you so much for watching and happy wargaming.